Right now, as you watch this, something is moving in orbit above your head that was never supposed to exist. And the four-star general responsible for protecting every American satellite in space just told the world that it could change warfare forever. The United States Space Command Chief, General Stephen Whiting, went public on April 15, 2026, with a warning so serious that defense analysts immediately compared it to the Cuban Missile Crisis. He said Russia is actively thinking about placing a nuclear anti-satellite weapon into low Earth orbit. A weapon designed to do one thing: wipe out every satellite circling this planet in a single catastrophic moment. And if that happens, the world you know today stops functioning within hours. To understand why this warning is so alarming, you first need to understand how completely the modern world depends on the satellites floating above your head right now. GPS navigation that guides your car, your phone, and every commercial aircraft in the sky runs on satellites. The financial system that processes every credit card transaction, every bank transfer, every stock market trade relies on satellite-synchronized timing signals to function. Military communications, drone operations, missile guidance, reconnaissance, and early warning systems are all built on satellite infrastructure. Weather forecasting, internet connectivity across entire continents, emergency services in remote regions, search and rescue operations at sea, precision agriculture that feeds billions of people. Every one of these systems depends on satellites that orbit between 300 and 200 miles above the surface of the Earth. That orbital band is the invisible backbone of modern civilization, and Russia, according to General Whiting, is preparing to put a nuclear weapon right in the middle of it. General Whiting was speaking on the Times podcast when he made the warning explicit. He said Russia remains a sophisticated space power and continues to invest heavily in what military planners call counter-space weapons. He explained that Russia is actively considering placing in orbit a nuclear anti-satellite weapon that would hold at risk every satellite in low Earth orbit. He said the United States could not and would not tolerate that outcome. He also made a statement that should stop every person who hears it cold. He said he believes the next major global conflict will likely begin not on land or sea or in the air, but in space. The reason Russia wants this weapon is not difficult to understand once you look at it from their perspective. General Whiting explained it directly. Russia looks at the United States and at NATO and sees an overwhelming conventional military advantage. American armed forces are more powerful, more technologically advanced, and more capable than Russian forces in almost every traditional measure of military strength. But that American advantage is not built on soldiers and tanks alone. It is built on satellites. American precision weapons need GPS to hit their targets. American commanders need satellite communications to coordinate operations across thousands of miles. American intelligence agencies need reconnaissance satellites to see what adversaries are doing. American early warning systems need satellites to detect missile launches. If you take away all of those satellites in a single strike, the most powerful conventional military in the history of the world becomes significantly blind, deaf, and disoriented. That is what Russia is trying to achieve. Not to match American power, to erase the technological foundation that American power is built on, the weapon itself, as described by American officials who have been declassified to discuss it, would likely work primarily through electromagnetic pulse effects. When a nuclear weapon detonates in space, the explosion itself is brief and localized, but the electromagnetic pulse that radiates outward from that detonation is enormous, expanding in all directions at the speed of light and frying the electronics of every satellite within range. A nuclear detonation at the right altitude in low Earth orbit could, in theory, disable or destroy hundreds or even thousands of satellites simultaneously. Representative Mike Turner of Ohio, who chairs the House Intelligence Committee and was among the first lawmakers to publicly sound the alarm about this weapon, said it could render low Earth orbit completely unusable for satellites for as long as a full year. The debris, the radiation belts intensified by the blast, and the sheer electromagnetic chaos unleashed by such a detonation could close off the entire orbital band that humanity depends on for communications, navigation, and security. The word that Turner used when he described this possibility was the same word that General Whiting would use months later. He called it the end of the space age, not a setback, not a temporary disruption. The end. Because if low Earth orbit becomes a radioactive, debris-choked no man's land for a year, the satellites that keep modern civilization running cannot be replaced in time to prevent catastrophic disruption across every system that depends on them. And replacing all those satellites after the environment cleared would take years and cost trillions of dollars, assuming any launch infrastructure survived at all. Russia's approach to this weapon has not been straightforward or openly declared. Instead, it has unfolded through a series of suspicious satellite launches and orbital maneuvers that American intelligence agencies and independent space tracking experts have been monitoring with growing alarm. In 2024, the United States confirmed that Russia had deployed a satellite called Kosmos 2576 into the exact same orbital plane as a classified American government reconnaissance satellite. American officials described Kosmos 2576 as likely being a counterspace weapon, a satellite designed to operate in close proximity to Americans' satellites and potentially threaten them directly. Then, in June of 2025, another Russian satellite called Kosmos 2558, which had been shadowing an American reconnaissance satellite called USA 326 for nearly 2 years, deployed a new subsatellite. Dutch space tracking expert Dr. Marco Langbroek, who monitors unclassified satellite movements from the ground, identified this new object and raised concerns that it could be part of a weapons testing platform possibly equipped with anti-satellite capabilities. Russia has also been developing and deploying other counterspace capabilities alongside the nuclear program. American officials confirmed that Russia has fielded the S-500 air defense system, a ground-based missile capable of reaching and destroying satellites in low Earth orbit. In 2021, Russia demonstrated its willingness to use such systems when it fired a direct descent anti-satellite missile at one of its own defunct Cold War-era satellites, destroying IT and creating a massive cloud of debris that threatened the International Space Station and forced astronauts to take emergency shelter. That test sent a message to every spacefaring nation on Earth. Russia was willing to turn orbit into a combat zone. General Whiting also disclosed something that has received far less attention than the nuclear weapon discussion, but which may be equally alarming in practical terms. He said Russia has been conducting sustained satellite communication jamming and GPS jamming operations on a scale so large and so persistent that it is already putting civilian airliners at risk. This is not a theoretical future threat. It is happening right now. Russian jamming operations in and around Eastern Europe, the Baltic Sea, and the Black Sea region have caused GPS errors for commercial aircraft, disrupted navigation systems on ships, and affected communications in ways that civilians are feeling without realizing the cause. This is what the opening phase of space warfare looks like. It does not begin with an explosion. It begins with invisible interference that slowly erodes the reliability of the systems the modern world depends on. It is also worth understanding what Russia stands to gain even if it never actually fires this weapon. The existence of a nuclear anti-satellite capability, once confirmed and credible, changes the entire strategic calculus of every decision made in Washington, Brussels, Tokyo, and Seoul. If American military commanders know that any conventional conflict with Russia risks triggering a nuclear response in space, they must factor that into every deployment decision, every escalation calculation, every contingency plan. A weapon you never use can still shape the behavior of everyone who fears it. That is the logic of nuclear deterrence applied to space. Russia may be building this system not to win a space war, but to win arguments on Earth before a single satellite is touched. The intelligence agencies of several NATO allies have confirmed they are treating the nuclear space weapon program as a genuine and serious threat, not a bluff or a negotiating tactic. British defense officials have discussed the threat publicly. Canadian military leadership has said it is not implausible. The Five Eyes Intelligence Alliance, which includes the United States, United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand, has reportedly shared classified assessments about the specific technical parameters of what Russia is developing, though those details remain unavailable to the public. What is available publicly is the behavior. Russia is putting objects into orbit that nobody asked for and nobody can fully explain. It is jamming GPS across entire regions. It is shadowing American reconnaissance satellites with its own mystery objects. And it vetoed the one international agreement that would have explicitly prohibited what it appears to be building. The legal dimension of what Russia is doing adds another layer of complexity. Placing a nuclear weapon in orbit would violate the 1967 Outer Space Treaty, one of the foundational agreements of the space age signed by nearly every spacefaring nation, including Russia. The treaty explicitly prohibits placing weapons of mass destruction in orbit around the Earth. The United States and Japan co-sponsored a United Nations Security Council resolution in April 2024 that called on all nations to reaffirm those obligations. Russia vetoed it. Russia then introduced its own resolution calling for a ban on all weapons in space. The United States and its allies vetoed that one, arguing it was designed to ban conventional defensive systems while leaving Russia's nuclear space weapon program untouched. A third resolution, submitted by the United States, Japan, and Argentina in December 2024, was adopted by the UN General Assembly. But UN General Assembly resolutions carry no enforcement mechanism. Russia is not bound to comply by anything other than international pressure and its own strategic calculations. The intelligence picture is not entirely certain. Some analysts have pushed back on the most alarming assessments. Victoria Sampson of the Secure World Foundation, a leading non-governmental organization that tracks anti-satellite systems globally, said she would be very surprised if Russia actually deployed or used such a weapon. Her reasoning is practical. Russia itself relies on satellites. China, which has increasingly aligned with Russia, also relies on satellites. A nuclear detonation in low Earth orbit would not selectively destroy Western satellites. It would destroy every satellite in the affected orbital band, including Russian and Chinese ones. Using the weapon would blind Russia as surely as it would blind the United States. That mutual vulnerability, Sampson argues, may be the most effective deterrent of all. If you blow up a box full of BBs in orbit, as one Canadian military official memorably put it, you cannot control where they go. But deterrence is only as reliable as the rationality of the actors involved. And the history of warfare is full of moments when nations did things that damaged themselves because they calculated, correctly or incorrectly, that the damage to their enemy was greater than the damage to themselves. Russia has endured enormous self-inflicted pain in the Ukraine conflict, and continued anyway. The assumption that Moscow would never deploy a weapon that hurt its own capabilities is not a certainty. It is a hope. What most people have never seriously considered is what life would actually look like in the hours and days after a successful nuclear anti-satellite strike. In the first minutes, GPS systems around the world would begin returning errors, aircraft navigation would become unreliable, ships at sea would lose precision positioning. Within hours, financial systems that rely on satellite, synchronized timing would malfunction, electronic payments would fail, ATMs would go offline, stock markets would halt. Within days, supply chains, coordinated through satellite communications, would break down. Military command and control across entire theaters of operation would be severely degraded. Weather forecasting would become far less accurate. Search and rescue operations would lose the tools they depend on. Internet access across large portions of the developing world, where satellite connectivity is often the only connectivity available, would disappear entirely. This is what the experts and generals mean when they use the word catastrophic, not a setback, a collapse. The United States has not been standing still while this threat developed. The Space Force, which was established as a separate military branch in 2019, specifically to address the growing militarization of space, has been building defensive and responsive capabilities at an accelerating pace. It has awarded contracts for maneuverable small satellites designed to monitor activity in geosynchronous orbit. It has been developing its own counterspace capabilities that remain classified. The Pentagon's Golden Dome Missile Defense Initiative, announced in 2026, includes space-based components designed to intercept ballistic missiles from orbit, further blurring the already thin line between defensive and offensive space weapons. And through it all, General Whiting has maintained one consistent and deliberate message through all of it. A conflict in space is not inevitable. The goal each day is deterrence. The goal is to make any attack on American satellites so costly, so certain to provoke a devastating and overwhelming response that Russia calculates the risk is never worth taking. But the satellites are moving, the warnings are public and on the record, the weapons are being built in orbit right now. And the world that satellite technology created, the world where your phone always knows where you are and your bank always knows what you have and aircraft never get lost and missiles find their targets with terrifying precision, that world has never been more fragile or more fiercely contested than it is at this very moment. The next great war may not begin with tanks crossing a border or missiles rising from their underground silos. It may begin with a single silent flash in orbit that nobody standing on the ground can see, followed by a spreading silence that none of us, anywhere on this planet, are truly prepared for.